I'm Eamon.
I'm Merlin.
And we're Gay.
And His Enby.
Episode 3, right into your ear holes. We're glad to be back here for another episode of Gay His Enby. Another very cold, wintry day here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Excited to talk to you about so many great things on television this week.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of good stuff coming to you this week. Of course, we've got the first episode of the Salt Lake City reunion. We have the newest episode of Housewives of Potomac. And we've got the newest episode of Housewives of Miami. So a lot of good Bravo centered content for you today. But first,
as we always do,
as always, we have the newest episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, Season 15, Episode 4, Snatch Game.
An early Snatch Game, as we mentioned before in previous weeks. I will say, I think our worries about how this was going to turn out, it was better than I expected.
We didn't get any of our workroom stuff, which is, kind of essential to building the relationship between the viewer and the queens. So I didn't like that. We didn't get any of that stuff. Plus, I really like to watch Ru try to gaslight people into changing their Snatch Game character last minute.
We'll get into that. I'm not as big a fan of that, definitely, but I also think that led to an actually pretty decent Snatch Game this time around.
I think that it's awful that she does it.
Right.
I enjoy watching it, though.
And I think they cut, like you mentioned, they kind of cut everything around the episode except for Snatch Game, I would say.
Yep, no mini challenge this week.
There was a certain point with like the confessionals of where it was just like they were breezing it by so quickly to where it's like you can't even like get like it's just like, well, I'm really nervous and I'm really excited and it was just like one after the other and it was.
Oh yeah, I think we clocked it in that the first Snatch Game started 12 minutes into the episode.
They were like, we are not playing around.
Like, holy crap!
But don't worry, because obviously with the success of Real Friends of WeHo, I mean, it was really worth it. We won't get into it. We're trying to be better people and not rant about that stupid show.
Speak for yourself.
So we start off the show, as you mentioned. There's a little stuff in the workroom. Obviously, Amethyst coming in with her from her second time in the bottom. There's a lot of pressure on her. The fact that Amethyst is just like, I'm just surprised that I'm here, and I think Selena went us too. So
the
crazy.
Shade is not turned down just because we are shorter on our episode time. Yeah,
but like you said, they kind of breezed through everything in the workroom really quickly. There was no discussion. There was no, hey, this sort of well thought out character that you've been planning for months before coming onto the show. Throw that out and just be this random person because I'm telling you to. But it did lead to a good Snatch Game. And like you had mentioned last week, they divided it up into 2 different Snatch Games with 7 people each. I feel like they kind of also saw the success of what happened on All Stars this past season, where they did 2 separate Snatch Games with each person playing 2 different characters.
Yeah, so that worked.
To where they could kind of be like, okay, we can do this, but just, in a sort of different format. This was I would say overall a really good Snatch Game. I don't think the people who were bad, while they, yes, were bad, I didn't think there was like some exponential dud in the group. We'll get to it. We'll go through it.
Not in the first one.
No, the first one was really good. So who did we have in the first group?
In the first group, we had Marsha playing Tim Gunn. We had Luxnor London playing Amanda Lepore. Malaysia Baby Doll Fox as Saucy Santana. We had Mistress Isabel Brooks as Rosie O'Donnell, Anitra as Gordina Ramsey, Robin Fierce as Karen Huger, our beloved Grand Dame.
What a crossover! We'll get into that one. That one almost upset me more than anything.
And last but not least, we had Selena Estides as Virgin Mary.
I think everyone made smart choice. I would say, for the most part, I would say with the second group as well, everyone made smart choices. I didn't see any choice where I was like, no, that's not a good choice necessarily in concept. Like Like,
Okay.
let's talk like
Before they got to the Snatch Game, as far as selecting their character.
yeah, like
That was great.
like Selena has titties, for example. Like, I think the concept of what she wanted to do was a good idea. I think being the Virgin Mary as a slut is a funny concept.
I mean, it's been done. Not on Snatch Game, but it's not a new concept.
Yeah, it's like, at least you thought through it some way. I think you could almost see the worry on her face when things weren't being laughed at, that she needed to go bigger. And yes, was it the most successful? No. I don't think it was outright terrible.
No, it was just chaotic. It was more chaotic than what Rue wants on Snatch Game, so that's why it wasn't super successful in that regard, but
Right.
it definitely wasn't the worst.
Can we also get to Robin Fierce as Karen Huger? Because I had so many thoughts.
So, in my opinion,
Yes.
I've got one. Her Karen was factually good.
Yes.
She knew her character. She had her research down. She knew she was from Surrey County, honey.
That her marriage is an institution.
She knew who she was talking about, right? She would be a great Karen Huger in the biopic.
Yes, I would say that.
However, a Karen Huger on Snatch Game.
I think Karen is a good character for Snatch Game, but you have to really get those jokes in. And I think her jokes, the funny Karen Huger moments actually work well in terms of Snatch Game. But I just felt like there was no mention of a hot box.
Right.
And being a drag queen doing Karen Huger is the pristine opportunity to do the wig shift scene.
Oh, completely.
Which is arguably, I think it's my top 5 funniest Housewives scene of all time across the Housewives.
Really?
I love that scene. Oh, hold up, damn it. Hold up.
Yeah.
It's so good. But Karen is a great character that just wasn't executed in the sort of funny way that it could be. To some of the good ones on this round of Snatch Game, obviously Marsha did a really good Tim Gunn. I think Tim Gunn's such a smart choice overall.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Like he's a character that, like, even not even as a character, as a person, he would be great on like Match Game, right? If you were to put him in the original version of this game, he would excel amazingly well. So, I mean, to bring him here makes total sense.
I think across the board, when you pick a naturally funny person, it helps a lot in the sense that you can just say anything that they would possibly say. It doesn't have to follow such a rigid guideline.
Right.
And I think that worked well with her. I also think it worked well with Mistress Isabel Brooks, who did Rosie O'Donnell.
Fabulous.
And wrote that line of, like, we've seen sometimes with Snatch Game where it's like you're kind of just doing you as a drag queen.
Right.
But I think was a smart enough choice. She definitely was playing View era Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh, completely.
In the words of Rosie, big, fat, lesbian Rosie.
And then the fact that she made that comment about, I'm not sure if I'm Rosie O'Donnell or Abby Lee Miller.
But no, she did a really good job. I think it was a good week for Mistress too, because she's been, kind of sort of middle of the pack, but I think was so quick on her feet in terms of especially the dialogue with Rue.
Completely.
Were there any other big standouts for you from this first group?
Not really. I mean, everybody looked good. But I didn't really think that anyone else stood out.
Mm-hmm.
But the only person that I would say was bad as far as Snatch Game goes was Robin as Karen Huger.
Sure.
But again, it was in an acting challenge, that would have been great. But in Snatch Game, it just didn't land.
Absolutely. So moving on to our second group, this was the group that I would say definitely had some of the worst ones of the night.
Oh, yeah.
But who did we have for the second group?
In the second group, we had Lucy LaDuca as Joan Rivers. We had Sasha Colby as Jan Crouch. We had Jax as the Mona Lisa. We had Sugar as Trisha Paytas. Amethyst as Tan Mom. Spice as Miley Cyrus. And Aura Maori as Bretman Rock.
Yeah, I think F- Obviously, the Lucy LaDuca took this one completely of this group, obviously, but spoiler alert of the whole competition. Really great Joan Rivers. I think Joan Rivers is someone that probably gets thrown out a lot, but there's, I think there's a lot of people that could say they do a good Joan Rivers and
Yeah.
not, but she had everything down perfectly. She kind of also looked like Margaret Joseph more than Joan Rivers, though.
A little bit, yeah.
I was definitely getting that by, but
I will-
who's
I
to say
will-
those aren't the same person? at the
Yeah,
end of the
I mean,
day?
fair. I will also say that Jax's intro line with the tongue out "Nah," from the Mona Lisa was
They didn't show a lot of Jax in the Snatch Game, but at least they got her that one moment.
that
and,
one moment is like meme worthy. It's beautiful. It's fabulous.
and it was, I don't think a lot of people expected her to do maybe as well.
Yeah.
In Snatch Game, but it was good to see how, like, they show you have some kind of comedic timing at the end of the day. And I also thought Amethyst did really well as Tan Mom. I thought she had good gags. The spray painting the card orange because she didn't like how white it was.
Right.
I thought she thought it through out really well. And again, it wasn't like you don't have to. Some people get so caught up in the impersonation of it.
Right.
It wasn't an exactly perfect Tan Mom. If you've seen like footage of,
I have no clue who that character is, but
I mean,
I
it's
was
kind of-
at least able to be entertained by her
it's kind of a
performance.
decades old character. So it was. When was that? Like 2010. She was in the news. So like,
No clue.
but it was a good choice on her part.
I will say that as this this Snatch Game definitely had the best performances, it also had the worst.
Yeah, so that bottom row, I would definitely say was
Other
struggling a lot.
than Amethyst, that bottom row was oof.
Yeah, Sugar and Spice as Trisha Paytas and Miley Cyrus. I honestly almost think Spice did a little better. At least she thought through some. I know people were saying like her like basically turning into Goofy at one point and like was at least funny in how awkward it was. And
Yeah.
I get that. I'm just kind of.
To be fair, Miley has had those eras where she basically was Goofy.
Right, but I feel like again, that seems like decades ago, and I
Yeah.
feel like that joke's kind of been overdone in terms of.
I mean, the era that she was referencing was the first after she got out of her country phase when
Yeah.
she obviously the outfit that she was wearing was from the concert with Robin Thicke.
And even before that, she was giving more like Hannah Montana era vibe with the sort of she was the brunette with the sort of like
right.
thing through the hair and all that. Like,
As entertaining as that era of Miley is, I really do consider. I mean, this is probably not Snatch Game related, but I really do find today's era of Miley so much more intriguing.
yeah,
And I would have been interested to see how she were to portray a more serious character on Snatch Game. I know that's kind of an oxymoron, but I think modern Miley would have done well on Snatch Game as well.
sure. I think you have to be really smart to sort of pull something like that off.
Even if she was making fun of her previous self, like that would have been a Miley thing to do and still would have, I think, paid like homage to the growth that Miley has had.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then I would say both with Sugar and with Aura Mayari,
Who even was Aura Mayari? Who is Bretman Rock?
I have
Who
no
is
clue.
this person?
I never felt older than trying to figure out who Bretman Rock was, and I'm not even 30 yet, so that's a problem. But from what, like, I just Googled him, and he looks like a sort, because Aura said she picked him because he's Filipino. He just kind of seemed like a Filipino James Charles, and I was like, that. Why are we picking these TikTok stars? And like Trisha Paytas, I think made a little more sense, but again, I think
but Trisha Paytas is also like expanded outside. Like she's been on reality television.
Sure.
She's like been all over the news. ain't nobody ever heard of Brett Monroe, especially RuPaul. Ain't never heard of
RuPaul definitely was doing a great acting job trying to act like she knew.
RuPaul barely knew who Miley Cyrus was. Let's be real.
RuPaul didn't know who the last winner of All Stars name was. Are we surprised? But like Sugar's Trisha Paytas was kind of just Sugar's character that she's been playing these last couple seasons. To me, when I think of Trisha, I think of the fast talking. I think of like the, and there was really none of that.
And like Michelle says later in the episode during judging, like Trisha Paytas is known for her mukbangs,
right?
So like she should have had a smorgasbord of food that changed every time that the camera came to her.
Which I think was an interesting thing for Michelle to say, because all the scuttlebutt, if you follow like Insider Tea from Drag Race, is that Rue hates eating. Like on Snatch Game in particular. I think there was all
but
this
if she made a bit out of it, and like Rue could have at least laughed about that. And she has laughed at other characters who have eaten things on Snatch Game. Like, it wouldn't be the first time that someone did well at Snatch Game having food. So, I mean.
But I think it was pretty clear where things sort of shook up from that Snatch Game. We go back into the workroom the next day. The one thing, even though we're cutting down time when it comes to getting this into a 40-minute episode, they definitely have to include a sob story every episode. I mean, that's. Oh yeah, I feel like it's contractually obligated at this point.
Well, I mean, you've got to have funny haha, violins, and then funny haha, and then someone goes home.
Yes,
that's how the episode goes.
It's literally a math formula at this point.
Yeah.
But we hear from Lucy, sort of talking about her past, about being gay bashed as a young kid. Which, I mean, the fact that she said like literally she was gay bashed by another student, and like teachers were like laughing, and how triggering that was. It's just like, what is wrong with people? Anyways,
it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I know that you grew up very differently than I did.
Yes.
But that doesn't surprise me. I had some awful school experiences. So, I mean, and that was before I even knew anything about myself in that regard. So, I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous, but it totally tracks.
Adults are terrible. But moving on to the runway, and before we get to the judging, the theme for the runway was Beautiful Nightmare, which I'm shocked that they didn't use that as the lip sync song. You can be a sweet.
We cannot afford that.
We don't have
song.
the rights. We don't have the rights. Were there any standouts for you from the runway? Well, yes, there were. I think we both agreed that the biggest standout was Sasha Colby.
Absolutely. And if you want to hear our opinions on at least, who we thought did well and who we thought was less successful on the runway, definitely go check out our Toot and Boot video. It went out on Wednesday. So you can check that out on all the places.
But just the bodysuit, the aesthetic, the makeup, everything about Sasha Colby is just like absolute perfection in everything she does. And you had I think the problem with this runway, we saw a lot of sort of costumey looks.
Yeah.
Naturally, like very Halloween costume. And this was so professionally done and so well executed. I also wanted to shout out Amethyst's look on the runway, which I literally screamed as she came out as. This was such a like gay cultural moment for me, this Lady Gaga VMA performance. I know some people online have been like, well, it could have been executed a little better. And I see their point, but there was just like, I still remember like as a young kid, like at night watching that VMA performance and just being in awe of what I was seeing. Like,
oh yeah,
I feel like we talk about like special moments in gay culture. It's so important and so transformational, I would say, for a lot of people. We get to the judging. The tops, as we mentioned, are Marcia, Mistress Isabel Brooks, and Lucy LaDuca. And in the bottom, we had Sugar, Spice, and Aura Mayari. And the judges again critiquing Marcia for her makeup, which I found just like, she literally had a very like, multicolored, like put together eye, and it was just like still not enough.
They're not going to be happy until she takes an actual chisel to her face and like carves out an entirely new, like, I'm sorry. You want to critique her on her makeup, and yet she completely looked like a different person in Snatch Game. Like, the girl has skills.
It's like, it just doesn't
Like,
make
she
any sense
looked
to me.
exactly like Tim Gunn, and it's not like she looks like Tim Gunn out of drag. Like, that was work.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just kind of telegraphing at this point of terms of like, you can see with the judges' critiques who they want to get to the end and who they don't, and you know, which is not a testament to the ones that they do, because they are also usually very great. I think but it's just like, why are we still harping on this? She's clearly, at the very least, you can see that she is making improvements.
Right.
Anyone with an eye can see that this person has adding more makeup into their look.
Right.
Anyways, but then Lucy LaDuca wins Snatch Game. I think it was the right choice. I was kind of between her and Mistress.
Yeah.
And then in the bottom, oh no, Sugar and Spice are in the bottom too. Who would have ever guessed it?
I mean, we knew it was going to happen. I had it pegged for episode 6, but, you know, episode 4 is not far off.
And honestly, I don't think this was definitely a lot of producer shenanigans, because Aura definitely did the worst. I mean, you can make the argument that Aura's look saved her, which her look was on the runway was very good with the sort of exposed spine. And
both Sugar and Spice walked out there in, you know, Leg Avenue, Spirit Halloween, like literally looked like they just shook it out of a bag and put it on.
Yeah, it wasn't that.
They didn't even do it. There weren't even rhinestones. It was just straight out of the bag.
And you were shocked the fact that they didn't even critique them on the fact that the similar looks. This is the first time they really got actual direct critiques from the judges. And they didn't even mention the whole, you guys are basically in coordinating looks.
Well, they knew they were going to send one home anyway, so it didn't matter.
Or it got cut.
I mean, it could have got cut for time, but like at that point, if you know you're putting those two in the bottom two, why does it matter to critique them on that?
That's fair.
Because one of them's going home and it's not going to be an issue anymore.
Well, we could have gotten a double save that everyone was saying that we should have gotten. But yeah.
I'm sorry. So we get to the lip sync.
And the lip sync song is You Better Run by Pat Benatar.
It's choreographed. They choreographed their lip sync. And what I find funny is that they bothered to choreograph the lip sync knowing that they would end up in the bottom two together at some point, because they know how production works. I mean, they're at least that smart.
Well, in Untucked, they were kind of talking about like, well, either we both stay, or if one of us gets eliminated, we're both going to go home or whatever. And they kind of get talked down from it. But like, and people could make the argument that there have been, while we may not have directly seen it, choreographed lip sync in the past. Like, did Raven and Jujubee decide that they were going to do what they did during the Robin lip sync on the first All Stars?
I mean, maybe, but I mean, there's a very clear difference between, oh, so at some point, you know, we're just going to start crying and then we'll hug each other in the middle of the runway, which is basically what happened in that lip sync, as opposed to literally a count for count choreographing of the lip sync. How many songs did they choreograph?
That's
like, if it had been a different lip sync song, would it have been the same lip sync from them, or would it have been a different choreographed routine?
I don't know how extensively they really went into it. I mean, it's possible, but
well, I would like to think that they prepared in some way for the competition, because they didn't prepare their runway looks.
Well, I mean, but you were saying last week they went into it with this idea that we're going to stay as twins sort of throughout the competition. And
I think that's valid episode 1. And beyond that, like you said last week, you have to differentiate yourself.
And the only reason one of them necessarily went home from this lip sync, the only thing that the judges could base it on, was the fact that one of them tripped twice during lip sync. So Sugar ends up going home.
If you can't dance in platforms, don't lip sync in platforms.
Yeah. I don't think you were getting a lot, because we were watching it on a delay, and you were getting tweets in about how bad the lip sync was before it happened.
But the thing is that people are completely divided on this. Either they loved the lip sync and thought it should have been a double Shantae, which is outrageous, or they were like, this was trash and should have been double sachet.
I think what it is is that
Which I would have sent both of them home.
I agree. I feel like this whole time this season, I feel like I've been crazy seeing the praise of Sugar and Spice online. And this is not a knock on them. They seem like great queens. They seem like good people. You know, they have a great aesthetic.
I'm definitely interested to see because Mistress has adopted them
Yes.
as drag children. So I am very interested to see how they develop in the future. And if one of them gets on All Stars, they'll cast both of them.
Right.
So we'll get them back on at some point, and they won't miss out on an opportunity to cash in on that.
But I feel like, I was kind of ripping my hair out of like, why am I seeing something different than everyone else on like Twitter when I like look at the Drag Race hashtag? And I think what it is that the Sugar and Spice audience that they've kind of curated on TikTok isn't necessarily the Drag Race audience.
Right.
And they've been pulled in. They're probably watching the show for the very first time, or, they may have had some past knowledge of it. But I think that's a lot of what the following is based on. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just crazy. But as I mentioned, Sugar goes home, sad moment. Nothing like seeing someone cry in like a pink wig and like baby doll makeup. Just that visual and that dichotomy is interesting. But yes, we're down to 13 queens, I believe.
Yeah.
Got still a long way to go, and Spice is going to try to fight on their own. I think, maybe Spice can make it to the end. I think it's possible. I think the judges liked Sugar and Spice.
Yeah. I don't know. And next week, as we have learned via the previews, we are going to end up with a mini challenge. The library is open.
Yes, we'll see how that goes.
With 13 queens. Ooh.
It's libraries in the past have been a choice. I want to see. I'm interested in seeing how this goes.
Yeah.
But we're gonna take a quick commercial break, and then when we come back, we're gonna get into everything that's going on this week with Real Housewives, starting with the Salt Lake City reunion part 1. Don't miss it.
Well, hello, friends. I'm your pal in the mainstream media.
And I'm the Riz.
And, Riz, it takes years of strenuous, dedicated training before you're worthy to step inside a professional wrestling ring. But it takes even more time to develop complex, highly astute opinions about professional wrestling. Am I right?
That is correct.
Yes.
And you know where we can combine that?
Yes.
On the Wrestling Man.
That's right.
Sidekick Media Services. We are your sidekick in business for social media, video production, and more. Find out more at sidekickmediaservices.com.
Welcome back to Gay His Enby. We are now up with Real Housewives of Salt Lake City reunion, part 1.
3-part reunion. That's a choice.
Yeah.
I don't know if this needed 3 parts. I
Yeah.
mean, I get that there's still a little bit that we need to touch on in the next week's episode. Some people's like sort of personal stories, and I'm sure they're going to get into more of the Jen stuff. They only kind of touched on it in the beginning. I mean, from the fact that it's awkward in the fact that Jen's not there.
And she's refusing to do the sit down.
But if you want the real story, if you want the real, true, and honest story from Jennifer Shaw about why she defrauded all those people, all you have to do is give her your email address to her at realjenshaw.com, which she launched right before the reunion aired. What is she thinking?
Yeah, I don't see how that's a bad idea, how that could end poorly for you.
Is the judge like
she literally ran a scam where she sold people's email addresses to people to get them to buy onto the why am I giving you my email address? I'm not.
But also in just all of her statements about why she wouldn't do the reunion and why she wouldn't do the interview with Andy Cohen, it's just like, I need to tell my story. Girl, do an Instagram live.
Yeah.
Like this, it's just ridiculous. She's going to prison in about a month, I think, right? In February
17th.
So you don't have much time left. Get it out there. But yeah, so we get into the first part of the Salt Lake City reunion. This bit with the Sprinter van in the beginning was such a choice. And
They had to make up for how awesome the set was, because that set was beautiful.
It was very pretty. You're a big fan of that
I'm
kind
a
of aesthetic.
big fan of like the big Gothic churches and the stained glass windows and all of that stuff. Gorgeous aesthetic. And then they did it like distressed and like snow everywhere. Stunningly beautiful set. Like,
They kill it. I mean, the Salt Lake vibe kind of aids to this, but they've always had good sets for Salt Lake.
yeah, but they made up for the wonderful set with the awful idea of doing the Sprinter fan entrance. And Meredith said what we were all thinking is, I think we've spent enough time in Sprinter fans.
Well, it was so awkward because they didn't have a bit planned. They were just kind of like, "Yeah, we're gonna get out the Sprinter van now." I also don't know about you. Did Andy seem over at this reunion?
Oh, completely.
He seemed like he was very much, I think, voyeuristic in terms of like what the audience was feeling.
Well, and it definitely feeds into the rumors that have been going around that they're completely shaking up this cast for next season.
Yeah.
Because if Andy is not emotionally invested in any of these people's storylines, I can't imagine that they last. I would say my prediction is if they keep somebody, it's Lisa and Whitney, and Whitney will be a friend of.
My thing is though, like, I feel like are you gonna get anything different like looking around Salt Lake for other housewives?
Probably not.
I feel like it's just like baked into the city.
Could be.
Like there's a vibe of them where it's just a lot of like nothing feels sort of like real and lived, and like obviously these are people of wealth, so you're gonna get, it's not gonna be like average everyday Americans, but it's like there's no
grit to these people.
No.
And I think some of that comes with just because it is a city that is pretty much entirely entrenched in the Mormon church, which I'm not going to knock the Mormon church. I don't know enough about it to accurately criticize it. But when you have what is pretty much a theocracy going on in that city, you're going to get pretty much the same people. You're either going to get people in the church or you're going to get pariahs that are on the outside of the church. And that's what the stories are going to be. It's just going to be a rehashing of everything we've had before.
And I also
rinse and repeat.
I also think, Whitney said when they were in like the makeup trucks or whatever, she was because I think Andy asked something about like, what do you think the other side of the couch is gonna bring? And she said like, oh, what I expect, victimhood, and that they're gonna be martyrs. And I just thought like, but isn't that everyone on this cast right now? Like I feel, and extending even to the friends of, like, everyone's sort of like this big giant martyr to where they don't really. Even, and I'm a big Lisa Barlow fan and a Lisa Barlow apologist, but she sometimes falls into that same issue where it's just like, not everything is this serious. Like when everything, it's like kind of like a wrestling metaphor. When everything is done to the top level 100% of the time, and the big things don't actually matter. So it's like I don't care why you're fighting over this whole SEC filing thing, and I don't care why you're fighting over, like, I don't know. But
also, spoiler alert to anyone who didn't know this, we're actually huge wrestling fans too. It's basically man drag.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to put it.
I mean, for the most part, they're putting on big characters and doing a show in front of a live audience. It's a drag show, Mary.
We definitely also encourage everyone listening to also go check out the Wrestling Mayhem show over on Sorgatron Media, fellow Sorgatron Media Network partner. And yeah, we may be talking about that in the future too as well. So be on the lookout for that. But so there's a little talk about Jen in the beginning, the fact that Jen's not there because her lawyers said to not come. They ask about switching her plea. It's just crazy that like other than Lisa, it doesn't feel like any of them are still willing to just be like, what the fuck, Jen? Like why did you string us along for this long? Heather is still very ride or die and just like, I didn't feel upset at all. I was just worried about her family. Heather reveals that Jen was the first to, like, Jen right before she plead called her and told her she was going to plead like 30 minutes before, which I thought was interesting. But then we get into the sort of drama that's happening between Meredith and Lisa this season.
So Meredith, as a shock to me, because she hasn't expressed this at all during the season, Meredith apparently isn't super upset about the hot mic moment, which seems suspicious.
She's so adamant. It's like, I got over it. I just got over it. It's just like, okay.
No,
whatever.
I was angry because you unfollowed me on Instagram and you wouldn't let me watch your stories. And then you posted a text message where you had actually said something to me when my father died, as opposed to the story that I was telling that you didn't say anything about. I don't know.
Well, she also was saying, like, I was offended that she blocked me on Instagram or whatever because I felt like coming out of Arizona, we were on neutral ground. Lisa was like fuming at you because you were, according to Whitney, spreading rumors about her and getting placement for Vita Tequila.
I'm sorry. I'm still. You're mad because someone blocked you on Instagram. Didn't even block you. Unfollowed her, removed her as a follower, didn't even unfollow Meredith. She removed Meredith from her followers.
When Meredith, for like the first half of the season, like wanted nothing to do with Lisa and was avoiding her in like public events and stuff like that. So it's like,
so you're more mad about Instagram and a text message that got posted than you were about her saying you slept with half of New York?
I just don't get it. And she ends up, Meredith does apologize. She said, even if it wasn't my intention, I shouldn't have said anything about rumors about you. And she apologizes and Lisa accepts it. And then there's also the debate about Whitney's trying to differentiate, like trying to clear up this whole thing of what happened in Arizona and who said what rumor and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I lost the plot at some point. I had to watch this episode back to figure
So
out
did I.
what the hell everyone was talking about. As if like Whitney harping on this idea that like, well, Heather spun it around and said blowjobs for jazz tickets. I just said she had sex, or I just said that the rumor was that she had sex with a guy for jazz tickets. Okay, what's the difference?
I guess the difference is that, like, and I think we had mentioned this before, but like, sex implies like
Intimacy
or romance, and like a blowy for it is more like you're a whore. I guess could be the implication, which, like, first of all, if she is giving blowjobs for jazz tickets, good for her.
Girl,
you might as well get paid for doing a blowjob for somebody you don't even like.
But then we get this section also. Then we get into sort of Lisa's side of spreading rumors. And Andy asked that, on the beach in San Diego, San Diego, you implied that Meredith pops pills. And Lisa's like, yes, I said that because Jen told me they did K once. and
so then Meredith pulls out her phone and calls Jen
to like validate this story.
It was like Jen couldn't be at the reunion and couldn't be on the couch and talk with everybody about what happened this season, but we can still call her and she'll answer the phone knowing full well where I am and why I'm calling her.
Isn't that almost worse than what Diana did on Beverly Hills?
Oh, yeah.
Who was totally sick. Diana, please don't sue me. Because she's one to do that. But like they get into this debate about whether or not Meredith did Ken. At one point, what did Heather just says at one point, everyone knows what Special K is. Everyone.
I mean, doesn't everybody know what Special K is?
I'm sure Andy does if you ask Kathy Griffin. But we won't get into that.
We're never going on Watch What Happens Live, are we?
No. But Lisa says that Jen said this. Jen says she didn't say it, and now we don't know who to believe. Because if there's anything that's a clear sign of the truth, it's Jen Shaw.
Yeah. And the best line of the entire reunion is, "Why are you trusting her, the woman who lied and is going to prison for lying, over me?"
It's why that's my
Lisa is a gem. She is a national treasure.
This is why I thought Lisa did great this reunion, honestly, for the most part. It was a little, there were a couple moments that were a little missed. But, like, there's all this dialogue online. I don't know if you've seen about the whole, because there's all this stuff that's been happening now on social media of Angie K and, like, her taking a picture with that guy that had the White Lives Matter t-shirt, and then people finding out that Lisa also followed him on Instagram, and Lisa's getting dragged all over online. Here's my thing. and I'm gonna maybe rant just a little bit because Jen keeps bringing this up in social media posts as well of like, oh, Lisa Barlow supported Ted Cruz and has backed Ted Cruz's campaign, and Lisa's a racist.
Jen
and,
has made some she said some really fucked up shit in the past.
And
so she has no room to talk.
And I just think like really we're rah cheering this like criminal who defrauded people because it's the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, guys. They're all Republicans. I don't know what to tell you. It's the same with Orange County. Like I don't go into the show expecting that everyone is of that ilk, and it doesn't mean that I have to like that they're of that ilk, but it also means that I can still enjoy them on this television show. I
don't think they all are on either of those shows, but for the most part, you're right. Like whoever they get from those areas are most likely going to be like, we know how that area votes.
I mean, come on. And obviously there's certain, like what happened with Jenny last season absolutely was too far crossing the line. It was like those Facebook posts go past like anything in terms of like just decency.
For your own sanity, if you don't know about that, don't look it up because it's atrocious.
But it's just like, I don't know what people are expecting at this point from the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. It's just crazy to me. But anyways, Lisa is like, they kind of try to get to a conclusion with Meredith and Lisa's crying. And I don't know why. Lisa's crying always makes me laugh. She's just like, it's just when you bring up John and you brought John, it's my whole life. And it's just like, oh my God.
Jeez.
But then, so the friends of then come out, Angie K, Angie H, Dana, and we get into some of the more stuff with there. We see more of, the fight that got cut from the finale between Dana and Jen.
Why they didn't put in that in the finale, I have no clue.
I think it's because the way Dana explained why the fight happened, like they didn't really have any of those moments for context in the season. Because Dana says that like Jen was making fun of where she lived or whatever, which okay.
Further bigotry.
Well, but also, what is she talking about? I don't know anything about like the makeup of Salt Lake City. Like it seemed like she was like, oh, I live in like the countryside. Like it just seemed weird.
It's just any way to shade somebody. I mean,
and then she was saying, and Dana kind of elaborated on her Instagram too about like how like felt that Jen was making fun of her husband's name, who's Hispanic, and like intentionally getting it wrong.
Like just throwing out random Hispanic names.
Which, I can understand that's, not okay. And that fight happens. I think I didn't mind Dana this season. I think I do agree with some people who think that her reads are a little like rehearsed. Like she definitely like is thinking through like everything that she's going to say before she says it. But I mean, in fairness, that's the case with I think a lot of the women on this show.
Yeah.
So she's in good company. And then they talked to Angie H about some more of this whole, like, whether or not she told Whitney about blowies for jazz tickets. She brings up that, I guess, like, her husband and John Barlow got into, like, a screaming match or whatever at a jazz game. And
and John almost got taken out, like, by security.
And it was just like, but this is the part where I think Lisa was right on point, which was Angie tries to be like, well, he was screaming in front of your kids or whatever, Lisa. And Lisa's like, don't, try to, character, attack my husband. And when Angie tries to fire back with that, Lisa's just like, your husband literally created a fake Instagram account to attack me. What are you talking about? I can attack his character as much as he wants, which, yes, I think that's just,
Yeah.
And then there's debate as to whether Lisa, makes Instagram accounts in the same way to go after Meredith and go after Angie, which I think has been discussed a couple times the last couple seasons.
But there's been no receipts brought, so I mean,
there was all this stuff.
Prove it or shut up,
So they also post on if you follow Bravo, they also do the after shows after each episode as well as the reunion, and there's all this talk about like you said, the receipt. Lisa's doing all this stuff on social media with fake accounts that I think Angie H says at one point that she said my transgender son wasn't transgender or something. Mm-hmm. And it's like, where is any of this on the reunion? Like, you didn't bring us a receipt?
Yeah. And that brings us to something that you had mentioned, offline earlier is why are these moments not getting caught on camera? what is the production doing that they are not filming these women 24/7?
Is it not in the contracts? Like, from my clear understanding of like reality TV contracts, is that they're pretty extensive in terms of like when they have to film people and how extensively they can film people.
I mean, I guess it depends on whether you're on this type of reality show or something like Big Brother, where there's literally cameras on all the time, or Survivor or something like that, where you're in a controlled environment. But it's different when you're in a city and you're like living at home, and like there's families involved, and there's private businesses that can or won't allow filming or whatever, all those things.
It's just, I feel like we're getting in a lot in Housewives lately. Like we saw with Beverly Hills where they couldn't get into the Caribou Club. We saw it with, we're seeing it with Potomac a lot this season.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't understand why they don't have cameras in there, but that's besides the point. Then we go to Angie K to sort of talk about the issues with Jen, and Jen pouring champagne on her, which at this point, yes, it was bad. Like, I understand it was, and Jen was not joking. Let's stop,
Yeah, it wasn't funny. Like, if
and it
I
was embarrassing. But at this point, it's like we're harping. Like, this would have been this reunion is like 3 months after filming or Why is Angie still upset about this?
I can also understand though if the abusive behavior was as extensive as Angie was saying.
Sure.
Then I can understand why that seemingly small thing, while not good, right? It's still small. But I can see why that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And she's like, you're not just doing this in private anymore. You're literally embarrassing me and humiliating me in public on national television. Literally, fuck you.
Yeah. I also get that I do think Meredith and Heather were kind of minimizing it and like, and making a joke out of it. And then Angie brings up the fact that, because the topic comes up about why she told Lisa about how they were talking about her SEC filing in the Sprinter van or whatever. And Angie says she did this because Jen had been texting her and having conversations with her, trashing Heather and trashing Heather's business pretty extensively. And she basically saw that being a repeat in the Sprinter van, but to the opposite direction against Lisa, and decided to call it out. And the way that Heather is just like, I mean, yeah, that sounds like Jen, but hey, whatever. It's just like, Heather, girl, stand up for yourself. Why are you still backing this woman?
At this point, she's not even denying the abuse or denying the BS. She's literally going, well, that's the cost of being a friend of Jen. And so, like, you just have to kind of put up with it. And it's like, no, you actually don't.
Well, also,
you could say fuck you and walk away.
But also, she's going to jail. You don't have to put up with anymore. You have an out at this point.
For 6.5 years, you do not have to see her for half a decade.
And it's just like, I don't understand why Heather can't just stand on her own. But getting to Heather, then we get into the big part of this reunion, which is,
I don't know why we dedicated so much time to this.
Because it's the biggest cliffhanger of the season, and the fact that it ended it like this. So we get to Black Eye Gate, and Heather finally says that she doesn't remember what happened to her, that she blacked out drunk.
I call bullshit.
Oh, but you were saying at the time that you kind of believed her a little bit more.
I believe the reasoning that she was giving, and I believe that those are valid reasons. I do not believe that she doesn't remember, especially now, months after the fact. I do not believe at this moment that she does not remember that Jen punched her in the motherfucking eye. Yeah. Like, I completely believe that Jen hit her. I think that Heather got mad about Jen saying some snarky something, and because she was drunk, she was braver than usual, and she stood up for herself, and Jen smacked her. That's what I think. And maybe that's not what happened. I wasn't there. Obviously, I don't have proof that that's what happened, but that's my theory.
Yeah, and I think you resonated more with what she said about sort of like the Mormon shame of like drinking and blacking out and stuff like that. Which, yes, I think is something that is reasonable in terms of what we know of Heather. I just think like we've had this whole cliffhanger this whole season, and she's been going in interviews and on the after shows, like still being like, well, I know who it is, but I'm not going to say. And like, like saying people, oh, buy Bad Mormon because I'll tell you in the book, what happened.
Yeah.
It just feels like she got all the backlash from the episodes airing of people being like, this is stupid. I'm so sick of this storyline about the black guy. And I feel like this is her out.
Oh, no, I think that she's realizing that Andy would not put up with her refusing to say something on the reunion.
Well,
and so she went, well, my only out is to say I don't remember.
well,
and
we also find out that they did a whole investigation with what happened. Andy says there's no footage of like what actually happened, which I guess, but
Well, I mean, it's somebody's private home. It's not like they rigged the whole place with cameras. The cameras that were there were probably cameras that were used by the owners for like if they rent out the place for an Airbnb or Verbo or whatever app they use. And, it makes sense that they would have one on the door, but not on the rest of the room because it is a bedroom. So I understand why they wouldn't, but they would have it on the door for security reasons.
Yeah.
I get that.
also in this segment, drink every time when Heather starts talking, Lisa just goes, I wish you just said that. I wish you just said you blacked out. I wish you just said that from the beginning. I wish you just said that. She says it like 8 times. And it was like, my God, Lisa.
To be fair, though, she keeps getting interrupted while she's trying to make her point. And her point is you endangered a lot of people's reputations.
That's true.
And you, like, not just the people on this cast, but people in production. Like, you put their jobs on the line. You put our reputations on the line. Like, this was a big lie.
Yeah. And I think it's twofold. I think it's that element. And then I also think from a viewer perspective, it's like this... That's the explanation to like this big cliffhanger. This can't be it. And the thing is, I think it has to be it because if Jen's not going to be back, she's going to be in prison for 6.5 years. Are we going to get a conclusion to where we finally found out that Jen punched her? Because I do agree with you. I think that's where it is. I think Jen punched her and Heather doesn't want to say it for whatever reason.
Well, because she knows full well that if she says something, then at this point, she's already been sentenced.
Yeah.
So, just say it.
Yeah, honestly.
Well, but at the time, she still had not been sentenced.
Sure.
At the time, like, if that had happened, somebody on the crew would have leaked the fact that came out, and it would have affected sentencing.
Right. Well, and also Angie K, because they're asking them what they thought, and Angie K says at one point there was a dinner when I think she said it was the Greek night, when a producer asked Heather, like, are you going to talk about the black eye? And she says that Jen turned to Heather and said, what are you going to say happened?
Yeah,
to
that's
me,
super sus.
It's really incriminating, I feel. Like, that's why, like, Angie K has receipts for a lot of things. I think in a way that while I do think she is a little trying it for television, at least she has stuff to back what she's saying up.
Yeah.
In many ways. I also thought it was very odd when like Heather's like recounting what she remembered, like the little things that she remembered from blacking out. She's like, the only thing I remember is that I said Marilyn died in the nude and then I flashed my titties. And I was like, that's kind of like, I was like, okay.
But it's also really convenient that she only remembers moments that were caught on camera.
That's fair. Maybe it jogged her memory. But...
She remembers the moment where Jen picks up the wig, which is actually the next morning.
Yeah.
It's not the night before.
Well, I think she keeps saying that the reason I was like being well, someone knows or whatever, is that I was hoping that Whitney or someone who saw what happened or whatever would say something. Like she was like, I was doing it to try to get information to piece it together in my mind. She was trying to goad
people into revealing what happened, which, girl,
it doesn't make sense to me. All I'm saying is that, it's not as offensive to Marilyn's legacy as that Blonde movie, but like it was pretty bad for Heather to say that. Just saying. And
honestly, I'm kind of, if they do reboot this cast, like they shake it up, do whatever, I'm not mad at it. As long as we get to keep Lisa Barlow, I'm good.
Yeah. Well, and then the big cliffhanger from this until to the second part of the reunion is Angie K implying that she had heard around that Jen and Heather had a lesbian relationship or something, and it's like, okay, that's the cliffhanger.
Oh well.
Either way. Well, let's move on to Real Housewives of Potomac this week, because this episode of Potomac was, I mean, they're still in Mexico, but it's getting really good.
Yeah.
This a lot happens. Like, we're only a couple more episodes till the reunion, and it's like going by fast. So
Speaking of going by fast, Salt Lake City was a short season.
yeah, it was only like 13 episodes, I think.
Yeah.
So you know, what can you do? I think Bravo knows who to invest their time in, I guess. And I think Potomac is one of those cases. So we are back at the hotel in Mexico. This episode's very interesting because it's really only like 2 scenes in this whole episode.
Yep.
Like just them at the hotel and then them at lunch. But they're at the hotel sort of like decompressing and getting together, and Giselle and Mia are talking, and they're planning Robin's bachelorette party that we're going to see next episode. Giselle, and they're just talking about like, the stuff with Karen from last night about, and just the boldness of Giselle just being like, well, Karen's clearly jealous of Charisse. For what reason? I don't know. Karen's literally like the focal point of the show. And Charisse hasn't been on the show in 5 years. And then also to say, like, and then the Mia Wendy stuff comes up, and she's like, "Well, Wendy's clearly jealous of you, Mia." What does Wendy have to be jealous of to be like this? This is the part where with Giselle just makes no sense in my mind. I will say this episode, though, as much as I've been annoyed with Giselle this season, did have some good funny moments with Giselle.
Yeah.
Where it was like, this is the Giselle I like. Like the producers are also being really shady and like emphasizing the fact that she has like bubble guts from the night before. And like she's pulling bread out of her purse and eating it to
know what? Is it still I know when I was growing up, I always heard you don't drink the water in Mexico. And I'm pretty sure that's still a thing, but I also don't know. I also don't know if that was ever really a thing or if that was just like racist propaganda. Who knows?
We'll see. But Giselle, and they try to get on the bus later, and Ashley's like, "Oh, we have quesadillas on the bus," and Giselle's like, "I am not eating a bus quesadilla. That is deplorable." But yeah, so those are the moments of Giselle I like. And then Karen and Ashley are talking at the pool about the night before, and Karen is really upset about particularly how Robin came for her at the dinner, said she made it really personal, and that these were like personal attacks against her. And then Karen basically says, "Okay, if we're going to do that, then gloves off," because I'm going to bring up the fact that she says that Juan has another woman. That he takes around Georgetown, I believe, is the area in Potomac where he takes her around allegedly, and that it's a blonde woman that looks just like her.
And then the editors,
what do you think?
Did this like shady like negative line drawing of Karen with like a blonde, awful blonde bimbo wig, and it was just like, y'all some shady.
I love that you say it's a blonde bimbo wig, but it's literally just the hair she was wearing in her confessional.
Well, but what I mean is that the way that they colored it in with like a highlighter, and it made it look like it was like a Barbie wig.
It was so bad.
It was bad.
But so she's telling this to Ashley, and Ashley's like sort of trying to get information and stuff like that. And Ashley makes a good point of like, because this is the big topic of the episode is like the whole Juan stuff, and like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And Ashley kind of spoke to that because Ashley in the past has brought up possible cheating stuff to Robin about Juan in past seasons.
And he cheated before. That's why they got divorced.
Yeah. The famous when Robin and Giselle confronted her in that kangaroo restaurant. But so Ashley, being Ashley, goes and starts telling
Karen's
this.
Like, don't tell anybody about this. And
I want to talk to Robin myself.
Ashley's like, well, it's real hard for me to keep a secret. So literally, Karen goes upstairs to get her hat, and Ashley literally walks over to the bar and goes, "You know what I heard?"
Yeah. So, but that's the thing, is that this is Ashley's game. Like Candace said it this episode, like she cannot hold a secret longer than she can hold her bladder.
To be fair, though, Karen knows this, and I think she planted that on purpose.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, is that like Karen knows that Ashley would take that tea. And I think, I wonder if that, like, you wouldn't necessarily think it was the smartest move, because you would think if you were Karen, you would want to spring that on Robin.
Yes, but the reason I believe that she did it on purpose, number one, Karen's not a stupid woman.
No,
she's
not at all.
very smart, very methodical. Everything she does is thought out. Two, she didn't even address the fact that Ashley leaked that at the table later when it comes up. She literally just
rolled right into
it. It's like, you planned this. You knew this would come up at this table today.
Yeah. So they decide to go out shopping a little bit in Mexico. And then eventually Ashley pulls Robin aside to tell her.
After she spread the rumor around the entire rest of the cast.
Basically. And then she tells this to Robin. And I don't know what you thought of Robin's reaction. I think it's part of it is, reading into certain things, but that's what we do watching these shows. It definitely seemed like a reaction where she did that whole kind of laugh, but it was very much a laugh that could be like overcompensating, maybe.
And then she calls Juan.
Oh, so yes, she rings up Juan to tell him, and Juan is pissed from the get-go.
Loses it. Is like screaming into the phone. I'm going to
cuss these women out, and I'm going to,
At least he didn't threaten violence.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the way he was talking, I mean, there's been, when I don't want to get into the whole Giselle Monique stuff, but that's a whole other can of worms. But I don't know. I just feel like that reaction was a lot for somebody if it was just this like innocuous, because they keep also making the point of like, really, someone who looks like Juan would be with someone who's like as old as Karen, basically, is what they're implying. And it's like, if it's that ridiculous, why is Juan so upset? And but there's also this discussion of like, I can't tell with Juan from the time that he's been on this show, is this Juan, or is this because Juan doesn't like to be in front of a camera?
I know that that's been alluded to. And I also know that I could understand why he's upset. Like, because there is the stigma of black men cheating.
Sure.
And so I can understand why he's upset that is being applied to him. In past discretions notwithstanding.
Because people can change,
People can change, but like, I can understand if this is not true, why he would be that upset. Because it's like, man, I climbed out of all of this bullshit to make a name for myself and do something with my life. And this petty bullshit is just sitting here trying to pull me down. And that's what he basically tells Robin, is like, they're trying to rip apart everything that we are. Like, they are trying to come for everything that we have. And it's like, I get it. But also, like, at the same time, this is like the least accusation that's been thrown around this season.
Sure.
Like,
but
when Chris is over here getting accused of like manhandling people and like trying
being inappropriate with Giselle.
Like, it's not the same, but I can understand why the context is different for him. And
I just feel like we've seen it a couple of times this across the seasons of Potomac, where it's just like he gets real frustrated and just either leaves or does this big, like, he had that one hot moment where he was like, if it wasn't for the kids, I wouldn't be here right now. And it's like, and that's why I've always been trepidatious of them getting remarried, because it just feels weird. But also based on, like, we get into it later with this whole discussion with Karen and Robin, but it seems like what Karen's also implying is that Robin knows what's happening and is seemingly either fine with it or is,
Which I've said it before and I will say it again. stay out of people's marriages.
I
like,
agree.
if
But
they have an arrangement, it ain't none of your business.
so let's get to that point. So they get back to the table, and like you said, Karen immediately sits down. Robin's mad, but Karen just immediately starts going in. And I think part of the frustration, though, too, is that it's just a buildup of what Karen's feeling about this whole Charisse stuff and about this sort of concerted effort from the Green Eyed Bandits to bring this stuff out about Karen and Blue Eyes and all that stuff.
Which has been since season 1.
Yeah, it's not like it's, new scintillating tea necessarily.
This tea is cold. It has gone dry in the cup. It has stained. It's still, like, why is it still here?
Yeah.
Pour that out. Wash the cup.
But Karen says that Robin's marriage is fake, and the wedding is fake, and they kind of get into that regard. And the whole time, Giselle is just trying to pipe up for Robin in the background, and Karen is just ripping into just like what did she say? You're not even anywhere close to an alter, Giselle. You can shut up. Like, Giselle really should have just sat there and eaten like she does, which Giselle.
Well, she needed to be on the episode.
Yeah, but she does a real good job of just like sort of setting tea and setting like drama and then just sitting back and eat, like literally eating. I'm like she loves to just do that. But like
she's got to make her keep.
And then so when Robin's been holding on to this photo that apparently 6 months ago Giselle got, which to me only aids to this idea that this has been a concerted effort going into the season, but whatever, of Karen, well, we don't know it's Karen, but it's a woman from behind who looks like Karen, because they keep making that emphasis of like, you don't see Karen's face, and we don't see the photo. First of all,
it's all blurred.
Well, no, they're not even blurred. They don't even show it to the audience.
No, they do. They show it over. You can see it over someone's shoulder.
That's fair.
And it's completely blurred. And I know we were talking about this offline, but that is because since Karen does not say that it says that it's not her.
Yeah.
And they don't have a release from the other person in the photo either. They can't show that legally. They can't show it because the people in that photo have not signed a release to be on camera.
Right. And Robin's just passing the phone around the table
to everyone but Karen.
And Karen's like, "Can I see it?" And Robin's just like, "Nope." Which I thought was really funny. But from my understanding of the photo, it just doesn't seem like it seems like Karen's just, if this is to be Karen, is just with this person at a bar.
But then she almost kind of cops to it. Almost kind of says, well, I mean, yeah, I was in Vegas and there were some people with Redskins. Is that
Redskins jerseys? Yeah. But it's like, that's my other thing where it's like, is she cuddling on this person? Is she being intimate with this person?
Even if that's her in the picture, unless they making out or like grabbing on each other, like, this doesn't prove anything.
Because what we're to be believed of Blue Eyes, which is the big accusation, is that this is also Karen's driver.
This is the same person that she's been accused of being with since season 1.
Right. So it's like, can she not be in a photograph with another man at this point? That's not to get into the other stuff that we've talked about in the show, which is just like, I think it's pretty much an open secret that Karen's allowed to have arm candy and whatever. Yeah. And I think Ray's okay with it. And so
they've talked about it on camera. It's not even an open secret. They have talked about the fact that she is allowed to have arm candy to take to events and things like that. Because Ray doesn't want to go to that shit. He's old. The man's tired. He's in bed by 8 p.m.
Oh my God. Yeah.
He don't want to go to this shit.
Oh, jeez. But yeah. So
he's taking his prune juice by 7 and he's in bed by 8. Done.
So Karen keeps bringing up the blonde woman that looks like her, and Candace and Wendy both say that they've also heard this rumor before, because apparently it's a rumor that's been going on in the blogs and stuff like that. But then it transitions into Karen bringing up this thing. This is also the part that I thought was really calculated on Karen through this season, and good on her. Which is that she brings up that there was a moment at the season 4 reunion where Andy asked Robin and Juan about possibilities of a threesome as like a joke. And Robin's like, no, of course not. And then Juan says like, why? You want to spice things up every once in a while. And everyone laughs and Karen's like, that's funny. And then she says that in the after party for that reunion, Juan comes up to Karen and hugs her in a way that's very tight. To the way she said that, she said it was so tight that her breast went back to her collarbone.
No, her spine.
Her spine. And that Juan said something along the lines of, I want you to be the third in the threesome. Now, Karen brought up that a husband had hugged her in this way back when Giselle was talking about the stuff with Chris earlier in the season, but she didn't say specifically who. And Giselle says in her confessional this episode, I thought she was talking about Michael Darby. But come to find out, she's talking about Juan. Now, what I will say is, I think if this played out as Karen said, I'm sure what Juan said was a joke. Like, I don't think he meant that seriously. It was probably like a callback joke to what he said at the reunion, and everyone laughed at the reunion, so he figured it'd be a funny joke. I'm not saying that he had malicious intent at all by that. But for Giselle to, in her confessional, be like, Karen, you're being ridiculous. Juan don't want to get with you, trying to write this off when it's just so hypocritical on Giselle's part to act as though because Karen's a certain age or because, Juan didn't have a certain intention, that therefore it's not the same kind of offense when she's expecting exactly the same when it comes to the Chris stuff.
Yeah.
And honestly, if the Juan thing is worse in the sense that Juan
was explicit
and said something explicit, as opposed to Chris, who was just in
the
room,
vicinity,
in a room with you alone, and did nothing specific that you can name. So if that was Karen like playing the long game on this, that was really smart on her end because she made Giselle look stupid.
Yeah.
So they kind of, they don't reconcile anything at the dinner or at the lunch, I should say. And then Giselle's like, I'm bored, so let's transition to Mia and Jacqueline. And honestly, I was kind of indifferent on their issues for most of the season. I'm kind of on Jacqueline's side now.
Yeah, Mia's been treating her kind of like a doormat. Honestly, Mia's been really not great. Not great in terms of her behavior. She's been great in terms of drama.
Oh,
yes,
great
fabulous.
for the show.
But like as in a quality of person, like I'm not enjoying like the way she's treating people this season.
It's just like if this was any other person, but if this was somebody that you knew for 30 years who like, took her family took Mia in as a foster child, and like Jacqueline brings this up like really upset about like, I've known you for 30 years and all this stuff, and I defended you with the whole cancer, no cancer thing. My mother took you in as a child, and Mia then makes a comment of like, that's funny because I said, who spent Mother's Day with your mother? Me, not you. And like Jacqueline's just like done at this point. And I also think the thing that annoys me about this is that it feels like Mia, I think throughout this season, Mia so desperately wants to be a Green Eye Bandit. Mia so desperately wants to get in with Giselle and Robin.
Yeah.
And I've been in those situations before where it's like if you've ever been in a situation where you have a close friend and then that friend brings you into a separate friend group that either they're trying to get into or et cetera, and then they kind of either neg you or, shade you in front of the group to sort of like get their way in.
Yeah.
Like that feels like that's what's happening. And it also feels that way in the sense that Jacqueline storms off and immediately Mia's just like, so Wendy, I want to apologize to you now. Like out of nowhere.
Oh yeah. She's like, she had mentioned it in confessions earlier in the episode,
Sure.
but we know the confessions are taped after the fact. But she does mention it earlier in the episode in the confessional, and she says, Wendy, I really want to like you because you're super successful and you've done a lot of really good work and a lot of great things. And I really respect you. And so I really want to be friends with you. And Wendy, in a moment of graciousness, because Mia did not deserve this, says, okay, we'll sit down. We'll have our talk.
Yeah, and then they go to their room later in the night and sort of have a more deeper conversation about it. And Mia apologizes for throwing the drink and all that. And it just feels like, I think Wendy was just like, okay, I'm going to see how... I think she was very much like, I'm going to let you, sort of do what you're trying to do here at whatever point. I don't know if I believe it because it just seemed out of complete nowhere.
Yeah.
And let her do what she did. But we mentioned before also the not having cameras in certain places. And so we get this with the end, which is that they kind of rush through the final night in Mexico.
Which this is like the third time that they've done this on Potomac.
Yeah.
Where they just talk in confessionals about how they went out for the night and everybody was drinking and they were at the club. And,
Well, we see a little bit of the dinner beforehand, but like it's very like rushed and packaged together because they don't have enough time.
yeah,
in
it's
the episode.
montaged. It's not.
Clearly, the producers were like, "There's nothing super interesting here, so let's just get through this." But they're all seemingly having fun. Even Karen and Giselle are laughing together and all that stuff. I didn't see Robin at the table, which I thought was interesting. But then they go out to the club. And this is all, like you said, this is all in confessionals and like some like phone camera stuff that we're seeing, and that they're getting drunk. And according to Ashley, like at a certain point, they're just like flashing each other their skirts to show them that they aren't wearing panties, which like I thought gay men in clubs were disgusting. Like that is like beyond level.
I mean, we won't get into what happens in gay clubs amongst gay men, but
it's too much for this kind of a podcast.
I mean, this is rated explicit content podcast just because we don't want to have to watch our language. But that's even more salacious than I'm willing to go into.
But then Wendy drops the tea as the cliffhanger of the episode that at a certain point in the night, Mia leans over to her. She says she saunters over to her, right? And
I think so.
And says, I want to eat your box.
Woo!
That given very Real Housewives of Atlanta, season 9.
Come on, Portia.
Oh, God. And that's where we leave off onto this episode. That is quite the cliffhanger as we go into next week with Robin's bachelorette party. And then we found out that from people that we're going to get footage from the wedding with Robin and Juan I believe on the finale episode. So that'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of dialogue online of people sort of claiming things, and we'll see how that plays out. But right now we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about everything from this week's episode of Real Housewives of Miami. We'll be right back.
Well, hello, friends. I'm your pal in the mainstream media.
And I'm the Riz.
And,
Thank you
you know,
very much.
Riz, it takes years of strenuous, dedicated training before you're worthy to step inside a professional wrestling ring. But it takes even more time to develop complex, highly astute opinions about professional wrestling. Am I right?
That is correct. And you know where we can find that?
Yes,
On the Wrestling Man.
that's right.
Sidekick Media Services. We are your sidekick in business for social media, video production, and more. Find out more at sidekickmediaservices.com.
Welcome back to A Gay and His Enby. We are heading into Real Housewives of Miami for our final segment here.
What an episode this was my favorite episode of the season.
Honestly,
This was such a good, like, just up and down in terms across this episode. We start things off kind of with the tail end of what happened at Nicole and Anthony's
Right.
engagement party, and Nicole kind of reading Alexia for defending Larsa for making those comments. Nicole's just been on point this whole season, I feel.
oh, completely, 100%.
And then Nicole sort of tapers off, and all the other women are sort of sitting together at the table. And then we get into sort of this further stuff with Alexia and Adriana as Adriana's boyfriend comes up and sits with these other women. This guy is an asshole. Like,
Yeah.
he was kind of non-existent for most of these episodes. I mean, obviously there's all this discussion about whether or not he was married. But I honestly feel Alexia was doing this out of being a friend and saying, like, I've heard this stuff just so because Alexia and Adriana really, before this season, didn't have any issues.
Yeah, but that's not how it came off. Like, to me, it definitely came off as, trying to drudge stuff up, trying to make, a big deal about it. If it was something about her being a big deal or her trying to be a friend, she would have pulled her aside and not made it a big thing in the group.
Sure.
Like, this is the equivalent to her plopping down a Bluetooth speaker and playing her Instagram live to the table.
I think that's the problem with Housewives in general. It's just like in any other scenario, it's like this would be something you would do off camera.
But I mean, you could still do it on camera, but like you don't do it in the middle of the group. Like, I understand doing it on camera because like contracts, like you got to do what you got to do.
Sure.
But you pull somebody aside and say, "Hey, like I have heard this guy's still married, and I've looked up his thing, and the Miami-Dade records say he's still married." And then they could have squashed it right there by scrolling to the bottom of the screen.
That we get that later in the episode, but it was just like, oh my god, Alexia, really? You didn't scroll down to the bottom. But before that, so they get into this is why I think he was an asshole. So like, just
like, to be fair, I understand where he's coming from, but I also am like, you don't talk to people like that.
I think Adriana was revving him up too, in terms of how much she had been talking about how this was Alexia being shady and all that stuff. So he just starts off by being like, giving a cheers and saying, cheers to staying out of people's fucking business. Just first introduction with these women. And Alexia plays it off really well. And she's like, look, I don't know you from like whatever. And then he pulls out his marriage divorce decree or whatever. And I think where it just started was he goes, look, here's a divorce decree. Can you read? Are you able to read? Like to try to insult her.
I don't believe he was trying to insult her.
Really?
I believe he was, because it was dark. It was dark in there, because he also mentioned, do you need glasses? If you listen to what he says, he mentions, do you need your glasses?
He's just being considerate in terms of the I think he was doing it shadily.
I think he was being shady, but I don't think he was being a jerk. There's a difference. You can be playful, shady, and I don't think he was necessarily being playful about it, but he was also like being pointed, like, look, here it is. Like,
yeah, I get that.
Like, you need to read it. Do you need your glasses to read it? Like, I need you to read this, and we can squash this right here, because I'm done with dealing with this.
And then what I will say is that I was more on Alexia's side in the beginning until we found out that she didn't scroll to the bottom of that thing.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm like, okay, this is
girl.
You literally have egg on your face at this point.
This man has literally been divorced since 2019, and like, you're accusing him now of stepping out on his wife. Like, I can understand the anger.
But I think it also comes from a fact of like, it's not unlike a lot of men in Miami and a lot of men that have been around this group particularly.
Sure, but if you're not that kind of person, I can understand that you're like, no, I'm not.
Sure.
That's not me. Like, stop lumping me in with everybody else.
Yeah. So, and speaking of Alexia, she decides that she's going to organize this lunch at her apartment or at her condo to get the women together with two marriage lawyers, because a lot of them have been having worries after the Lisa stuff, and they've had personal discussions of just like, do I need to be protected? What do I need to do in case of a scenario like this, etc. So Alexia is organizing this. But before that, Nicole is having a conversation with a friend of hers who's a therapist who we had seen on the show before, to talk about sort of the stuff with her dad.
This irritated me.
It irritated me as well, because we kind of mentioned it before about how Nicole's dad is not the best. I agreed with the therapist in the point of like, one of the big sticking points for Nicole was sort of his young girlfriends that he constantly has around, and that he's bringing them to family events, and that it's becoming an issue. And I understand that from that regard, especially in the way that Nicole describes these women, which are like, he's clearly like in his 60s and 70s, and these are women in their 20s. The way Nicole described it is like women who would like probably burn his house down. But I understood the therapist being like, he clearly made some form of an effort by not bringing anyone, because this is something that you have vocalized that this is an issue for you. And I understood that element of it. I think it's still a two-way street. I think that he needs to make more effort, and I think putting this on Nicole and sort of, I don't think she should be guilted in any way.
Right. I mean, we have discussed many times that when it comes to a parent-child relationship, it does not matter how old that child is. It is the parent's job to make sure that that relationship is healthy.
Yeah.
That child had no choice in being in that situation. It does not matter what's happening. That parent needs to make sure that that child is happy with them. if they want a relationship. And I mean, if they don't want a relationship, fine, like burn the bridge. But like, you can't expect the child to put all the effort in and to make all the
Sacrifices.
concessions and sacrifices and, you know, compromises on what they will put up with. Like Nicole has put her boundary in place, and like her dad seems to be making strides, but maybe not enough for her.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's okay for her to say, I'm done.
Yeah. And to
Even
keep
if her dad
boundaries.
is trying to do better. And even if he does become the person that she wants him to be, it is still perfectly fine for Nicole to go, it's been too much. It's too far gone. I'm done.
Yeah, I agree. So we then get into Alexia's lunch. This was my favorite scene of like all of Housewives this year. Well, the year just started.
So chaotic.
This was so fun. The minute that Marisol like is like sipping her like wine or whatever, it's like, this is too sweet, and then pours vodka in.
I knew this was about to go off.
Alexia and Adriana get into it, that Alexia felt that Adriana's boyfriend disrespected her and stuff like that. They started fighting as the marriage counselors or the marriage lawyers are coming in.
Oh, these poor lawyers.
Oh, it was so good. They were just like smiling and getting like.
He even tried to step in a few times to like calm people down, and it was not working.
Well, the best part about this whole scene was they eventually sit down in their living room and like they're fielding questions or whatever. And it's just like an opportunity for these women to be super passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Like Adriana's just like, can you look at this divorce decree and see if this is like, and then Nicole just being like, hey, do you have any in cases of slander and libel, how somebody can be like right in front of Larsa?
It's like, that's not his area of expertise. That's not what he does.
This was we thought the disinvitation last week was like Nicole's like amazing moment when Nicole got up out of her seat, grabbed her purse, pulled out her credit card, and was like, "Here, I'm paying you for your time now." That was a game defining Housewives moment for me. They're filming the reunion right now,
good.
and Nicole is first seat at the reunion, and she has earned that shit this season.
Oh yeah,
I was so gagged by that. Marisol was gagged. Everyone was gagged. I loved also them just 4 or 5 people just screaming at each other across the room, and Frankie, Alexia's son, just in the balcony, just being like, "These women are freaking crazy."
Like he literally says something to a producer that's up there. It's like they're being really loud. Like they had to they had to put it in captions on the bottom of the screen because you could barely hear him because of how loud they were being.
It was so intense and so back and forth. And then Marisol, not trying to diffuse it whatsoever, is just like, "Hey guys, stop. Everyone stop for a second. Nicole, I have the evidence of sleeping around." Like, that's not the point, Marisol. That's not going to diffuse anything. But then she says, like, her evidence isn't even really evidence, which is that she got a DM from someone saying that Nicole had been with this guy while they were residents at the hospital.
Right.
But this is at a time in when Nicole and Anthony were separated, so Nicole was dating other people. But also beyond the fact if like this is also a resident, not the entire doctors in the hospital, which was what Lars's accusation was.
You know, I don't know if you know this, but housewives tend to be prone to hyperbole and
Yes.
exaggeration. Yeah.
They're big fans. And then Lisa starts to sort of ask questions about her situation, or about Sally. What did Marisol use the term?
Sally and Harry.
My friends Sally and Harry are going through this issue. And I think the advice was really well and sort of like well put in terms of like what Lisa's rights are, what, is a fair offer in terms of something like that.
And what her next steps need to be as like in terms of taking inventory of everything, moving it out of the house, things that, are hers and don't need to be caught up in the divorce. She needs to get out of the house and it needs to be inventoried
and
so
that
she knows if it disappears.
And if you're going to have Lenny move you out to a house, having, within the trust where not only the kids benefit from it, but that there's certain details in it to where you're protected and you're getting you're not going to be screwed in the end.
And there's not like limitations on, well, nobody else is allowed to live there. Like if she remarries, it's like,
Yeah.
all of those sorts of things. So, that is the end of that dinner / lunch / whatever that was.
/ battle.
But then that transitions back to Lisa's house, and Lenny is at the house.
This scene was like
gut-wrenching?
Really gut-wrenching and really just real and honest in terms of everything going, because Lisa's with the kids at her house, and then Lenny doesn't even talk to her, just goes straight up to his room. Very, very cold. And Lisa kind of goes into more depth of like how the kids are handling things, about how her son is asking a lot of questions,
how her daughter has just been super angry
and you see it on like her daughter like acting out and stuff,
like literally slaps her.
Yeah,
and she's like, I can't even be mad at her. Like, yeah, I have to discipline her in the moment, but like I can't even be really upset because like she's acting out because all of the stress in the house. Like, I get it. Like, I understand.
And also just talking about like the questions her son is asking, not just in terms of like their marriage, about their love for each other, but like not knowing where they're gonna live. Like, are they gonna stay in this house anymore? Like a child, because I think her child's at least like maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that is something where it's like you're putting a pressure on a child. And to me, it's Lenny doing this because we don't know everything. We don't, we only know Lisa's narrating most of it because she's on the show, obviously.
Yeah,
so
but
we're going to get most of her
the
side.
actions that we've seen him take on camera.
And I think it's just such a contrast in terms of like what we saw of Lisa as Lenny is like ignoring her and like just hiding out in his bedroom, like Lisa actually parenting and Lisa actually taking care of the children. I don't think that's, from what we've seen, more different. Oh, and Lisa, I forgot about this. Lisa brought up at the Nicole's thing at the beginning that that Lenny's mother was over at the house with the kids.
Oh, yeah.
And he just like cursed out his mother at one point and told her to get the fuck out.
And said, I never want to see you again, and kicked his mom and dad out.
And apparently
of the
did
house.
this in front of the kids.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like, that is
and a friend that was over, like there was it wasn't just her, there was like a play date with other people's kids.
It's just like, to me, I'm not a custody expert, but to me, a judge has to be looking at something like that it can't be looking favor on Lenny in terms of custody, in terms of that kind of aspect.
Well, and it makes me question what's going on with Lenny, because you don't turn on everybody without there being some underlying something. And that's not to excuse what he's doing
right
at all. But something else is going on here. And for the kids' sake, I hope it gets resolved soon.
Yeah. And so Lisa goes up to the bedroom towards the end, and she tells him like they're filming me and I have a mic on, just so you know. And
I think she's trying to get a check for the nanny.
Yeah. And they just get into discussing things, and we hear the mic picking up everything Lenny's saying. And this was just so gaslighty of Lenny being like, I'm just trying to give you, like, basically, because this is all about Lisa leaving the house and getting a new house.
Like, you should be grateful for everything that I've done to make this easy for you.
I think his exact words were, I'm trying to get you more than you even deserve.
Disgusting.
And it's just like, this is just like so manipulative. And I think it's just a test. Could there be a both sides to this story? Maybe. But I think just from what we're seeing with our own eyes, it's really a testament to Lenny's character in this regard. And you just feel for Lisa in terms of everything she's going through. And hope that, she's a really good, hopefully hero of this story. Because I think a lot of the audience is really rooting for her.
Yeah. I mean, I really am looking forward to hopefully some resolve with all of this. And once we get to the reunion, I hope we hear how things have gotten better in this situation, but only time is going to tell. And last but not least, we have our tops and bottoms of the week. Eamon, what are you feeling this week?
We have a fun week of shows this week. My top for this week, you know what? I'm going to give it to Nicole. Nicole's really impressed me on Miami, and I think, I think not since Sutton have we seen like a real like high level Housewives performance from like somebody new. I think she can, I think she's secured her spot there for a long time to come. I think she's stands true to what she believes in. I think she's not afraid to get confrontational when she needs to and balance it really well. And I really love everything that she's doing over on Miami. My bottom for this week, can I give it to just Salt Lake City in general?
Yeah.
I think we've been very negative on Salt Lake City this week, and there's got to be some change that needs to be made. I don't know if it's revamping the whole cast. I don't know. I don't know if it's putting it on pause. God, I hope not. But yeah, something needs to change when it comes to that formula over there. How about you?
My top of the week is probably going to be Karen. Karen Huger. She pretty much orchestrated that entire episode to be what it was. And she did so flawlessly. She dropped that nugget to Ashley. Ashley ran off like a good little bone carrier, carried it to the rest of the group, and like it was flawlessly done. Beautiful. This is how you do reality television. And, this is why she will always be the Grand Dame of Potomac.
Made up for that terrible Snatch game, too.
Uh-huh. And I'd say that my bottom for the week is definitely Lenny.
Oh,
fuck that guy.
Fuck Lenny.
Fuck that guy. Literally.
What
worst guy. Definitely, he keeps moving up my list for worst house husband, and I think by the end of the season, he's going to be the top of that list.
Oh, for sure.
Well, bottom of that whatever.
Big old bottom.
Big ol' bottom. Hey, thanks for joining us this week on A Gay and His Enby. Tune in next week for more of our recaps and hot takes. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever you're listening. And check us out on our social media at A Gay and His Enby on all the platforms. A special shout out to Shane Ivers, who wrote Pulsar, the song we're using for our theme. For my husband Eamon, I'm Merlin, and we're out.
This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.